So I'm here to talk to you about a vision for an AI-first product organization. So my name is Chris. I've been in tech for about 30 years. I've led engineering teams for perhaps 25 years or so. The last two, I've really been spending figuring out how on earth AI changes everything that I thought I knew about software and engineering and leadership, which has been a really fascinating journey. I've always spent my time bouncing between founding companies, leading and scaling startups, and data and AI consulting. So this is the kind of phase I'm in at the moment. So I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to go as fast as I can through, I guess, a broad sweep of what an AI-first product organization might look like as we kind of crash into the next phase of software. It does really feel like we're kind of almost jumping out of a moving car here with the way that this is working, and we're all struggling to catch up. So I spend lots of times with teams helping them to figure out AI. I've got a few different kind of insights about how that's gone at different organizations. We've already had some great stories as well, and I'm going to kind of hopefully show you an optimistic future of how this could go potentially, as well as some of the pitfalls that I've seen as well. So we build our companies to make software, right? That's what we do. We have teams, roles, handoffs, sign-offs, flow through. We have tickets, we have Scrum boards, we have Jira, we have Trello maybe. We have all of these different tools that we use. And the reason that we spend all this time and effort coordinating to make sure that we can get the software out as efficiently as possible is because software used to be really, really expensive. It was very, very expensive to make. Engineers were expensive, and therefore their work output was expensive. Now, just like we were hearing earlier from Colin, AI has made the process of creating software, the creation of artifacts, as in the code itself, utterly cheap. It is now extremely easy to churn out 100,000 lines of code in a month or something. Anyone can do that if they've got the tokens. Super, super easy to do that. So artifact creation now is effectively free. And that covers code, that covers product documents, PRDs, specs, tickets, whatever you like. It's very, very easy to create artifacts. The chances of me being able to create a slide like this myself with my fair hand is probably less than zero. But thankfully I can just ask an AI now to come up with a nice image with a nice style, and it'll do it for me. So artifact creation like this, very, very cheap. So if people are getting faster at creating artifacts, and it gets much, much quicker to create stuff, are we getting faster as organizations? Are we getting faster as teams? Is our software delivery getting faster? And the answer is no, not really, and certainly not at the same rate. So the studies that are showing, I don't have full details here, but I can point you to them if you're interested. That generally they're showing that whilst individual people are maybe sometimes reporting 2 or 3 times speed ups with their software, and sometimes much more, but it's fairly common to hear people say, "Oh, I'm about 2 or 3 times faster than I was with AI as an individual." That the team that they're operating in is often no faster at all, or maybe just even a few % faster. That's pretty common. Now, at OpenAI and Anthropic, the kind of, I don't know, the Mecca, the El Dorado, the one place that every AI engineer wants to work, right, it seems, and the place where we should be getting the most improvement from AI with our software. People are reporting incredible speed ups, 10, 20 times. However, the organizations themselves, as they're using these tools, are only getting about 50 or 60% faster. I think 60% is what the latest studies from Anthropic are reporting. So there are some hard constraints here. There are clearly problems that happen when you take a bunch of individuals going faster and try and make a team go faster. And this is kind of probably obvious to everyone in the room, but that's what's happening. And luckily, we have some theory about how this works. So there is a book from the 1980s called The Goal. Who has heard of the theory of constraints? Maybe 20% of you. Who has read the book? Fewer of you. It is quite kind of an interesting sort of little novel thing about a factory and robots. It's quite interesting. It's quite worth reading. But this is Ilya Goldratt there who wrote the book, and his theory was that every system has one bottleneck that defines the entire system's speed. If you fix that bottleneck, the system will get faster. If you then try and fix something that isn't the bottleneck, it won't make any difference at all. It gets worse than that. If you try and fix something that isn't the bottleneck, you can actually make the entire system slower because you're introducing more queues and more build-up and more blockages. So the only place that it is worth working on a system is at the bottleneck. Speed up anything else and it just doesn't get any faster. So what's happening? If we have made coding faster, yet in our organizations coding was not the bottleneck, then we are not improving the speed of our system. All we are doing is just increasing queues somewhere else. And what that looks like for people is something a little bit like this normally. It's that we have a huge amount of PRs and some poor reviewer guy whose job it is to kind of fix or kind of review all of those PRs. That's kind of how it can feel for our senior engineers, especially in order to, when they're kind of dealing with their inbox in the morning. And then what can we do, right? Well, we have to start thinking about the constraints in our systems. So this is just one example. This is the one I see most commonly when I'm working with clients. It's the code review. It just takes forever to get anything out because there are so many PRs to review. So the answer then is, how do we fix code review? Do we apply more engineers to code reviews? Do we slow down the code? Normally the best way to look at it is look at the code review process and think, actually, PRs are just an invention by GitHub in order to sell more of GitHub or to help with open source. Do we actually need to use PRs? Maybe we don't. That might not work for you, but it might. What about adopting something like Martin Fowler's ship, show, ask methodology, where he says, don't review most of the PRs, just review a few of them and only the ones that people feel that they need to have reviewed, for example. So it's about changing. These are just ways of solving the problem. They're good ways of solving it for most people, but it just gives you an idea of what you can do. And the point is, don't fix your PR process if you don't have a problem with your PRs. Just fix the place where the bottleneck actually is. If coding is the slowest bit, congratulations, you're now going a lot faster with AI, but it's most likely to not have been the slowest bit. Find out where the constraint is and go from there. So that's one thing to think about when thinking about how to make your team faster and how to kind of think about how the future would look. So there's a kind of a fork in the road when we are looking at how to make our teams better for AI in the future. And there are really two ways that you can take this. Or at least two ways. These are two I'm going to talk about today. There is the process of hybridizing your tech team in order to make them more effective and efficient. And there is the process of amplifying your tech team. And I'll define what that looks like in a minute, but it basically leads you to very different places. So firstly, let's have a look at hybridization. What do I mean by hybridization? I mean that everybody in your organization starts taking on some of the areas around itself in order to be more effective, which means that engineers who are waiting for product people start making product decisions, and you end up having testers who are kind of waiting for the code from other people, maybe just prototype the code or write the code. The developers start writing the test stuff on behalf of the QAs. The designers start kind of prototyping things because things don't quite, they just haven't got what they need. So they start prototyping from the coders, and they all start working together, and then they all start creating each other's artifacts for each other in a kind of slightly chaotic way. And this is kind of how it ends up looking, where you have all these different people working on different things really, really quickly. Now, there's some element of this is good and helpful, and that you can start helping each other out. But the danger is when everybody starts sort of overlapping with everybody else's work in a slightly weird way, and then it gets really interesting. So devs start making decisions without talking to customers just because it's quicker, or everyone starts working past each other. Constraints move around the system, but things tend to slow down at that point. So, and collaboration then seems to be a bottleneck. So we fix that just by removing the collaboration. And then we end up with something a bit like this, where you have a one-person team is controlling everything. So one person is a dev, a designer, a product person, a QA. They do everything. Now, if you think about it, the idea of a one-person team actually makes no sense. It's oxymoronic as well as being moronic. It just doesn't make any sense at all. But it's a real idea. You know, there was one CEO of a famous cryptocurrency organization that laid off 14% of their staff and said the future was one-person teams, which again is a bit crazy. So it sounds bold, but the team of one just isn't a team. And the challenge with this is that you end up having a bunch of things, and if I had more time, I'd go into the theory behind this, that go wrong at this point. Everybody's sprinting flat out to get everything done. Everybody is busy, but there's no checks and balances. There's no discussion. There's no understanding of what should be built. People forget and outsource their judgment to AI because they're moving so fast they can't even think. So they're running around a little bit like hares, banging into the wall. And what we really want to do is have less of that and more of the kind of tortoises with some kind of motorized, battery-powered, 21st century scooters zooming past them. So rather than allowing AI to get people to run around like hares, we should be maybe using AI as a way to amplify and make maybe the tortoises go faster. And so the idea is, instead of having one person taking on all of the jobs, how about we have a really small team, cross-functional team of people who are all amplified with AI? So let's talk a little bit about what this might look like. So an amplified developer is someone who I think we're mostly familiar with how that might look. So code now is very, very cheap to create. What could have taken 6 months now takes 6 weeks, and sometimes you can have a conversation about it in the morning, don't even bother to write down the ticket because you've already written the feature and it's gone up in the afternoon. That's a really good place to be. But you still need the PM and the designer in the room. You still need your QA to be working with them. But ideally, you're having a conversation and just building the thing together, amplified, not the developer going off on one and trying to do their own thing. So a little bit like Shri or your Esther, who said, look what we built. I thought that was really cool. The idea that they can work together with other folks, so that the developers can free themselves from kind of the grunt work and more think about, okay, what do we actually want to build it? How do we want to build it? How can we get that done quickly? They're freed from more strategic thinking. Then what does the product manager do in this context? Well, maybe the product manager has a really close connection to the customer insights. They can aggregate all of the surveys. They can look through transcripts and videos really, really fast of all the conversations that anyone has ever had with a customer. Instead of waiting for weeks for interviews or trying to get people on the phone, they could even test ideas against digital twins of customers, maybe that the platform team has built for them. And they can build rough prototypes and show it to customers. Doesn't mean it goes into production, but it gives that kind of loop of ideas a really quick testing time, so they can close that loop really, really fast. So they are freed from the idea of ticket shuffling, because the devs are building so fast they don't really need tickets. You just build the next thing. So therefore, the product person doesn't have to worry about what Jira looks like anymore. They can actually think about what the customer wants. So they can think more strategically. And then a designer is again freed from all of that, now I have to make a PowerPoint for the CEO. I'm sorry, I can't do your design system change today. But they don't have to do any of that because the AI can do the PowerPoint. So therefore, they are freed, instead of sort of shuffling screens and doing layout. If you've ever worked with designers or good designers, you will know that no designer likes to do layout. They're just not interested in layout. What they love doing is building and thinking about design systems and user experience. So they can get back to that work because the AI can do the layout if given a really good design system. So, and then they can think about the strategy and the leadership. So what you can kind of see here is, instead of trying to find these crazy kind of hair unicorns. I should have probably put a unicorn on the hair and made it fluffy and dance in a caravan. But the idea is that those people who are juggling everything don't work so well. But if you put together really amplified, cross-functional experts in an area, give them strategic leadership training, give them permission to do great things, then they can do really well with AI. The last thing, I have almost got no time to talk about, but basically the idea of delegation versus abdication. As AI gets more powerful, don't give AI everything to do, just make sure you're still in charge at the end. So to summarize, make sure that you are only fixing in your systems the constraints. We have to build systems and product teams which change the way that software is built, because otherwise we'll bump into the same old constraints, and the constraints will move around our teams. Often this is because we are trying to inject AI into an old setup that was designed for humans, not for agents. So therefore, we need to come up with new ways of doing it. My favorite way of doing that is the amplification route with really small teams, with really empowered people. So you don't get too much groupthink and you're able to discuss and debate and still get things done rather than one-person teams that bounce off the walls. So that is how I think you should design a product organization for AI. Thanks very much, everyone.